Welcome to the Dibley Diaries for this week. This week we are thinking about the Luke 6 version of the Beatitudes, and it's led me to think for the Rural Challenge about how do we treat the people in our church communities, those who have a lot of wealth and those who don't have much wealth at all. I've certainly had cases in my church communities where people with wealth have tried to skew the agenda to their will just because they have the money and resources. I've had people who wanted to influence the worship patterns, and I've also had people who have done things in the church building which they've just paid for that they didn't have proper permission to do, and legally that was an absolute nightmare of what to do to sort that out. I've also had instances in church communities where poorer people have left the church community and gone to a different church because they felt that they weren't accepted by the people who were richer than them, that was a really difficult place for them to be. And I've also had places where richer members of the church community have left because other people have really been very judgmental about the fact that these other people had money. And it's a good challenge for us to have, and it's a difficult challenge for us to have. How do we build church communities which are built on kingdom values? Jesus told us that the kingdom was nothing to do with how much money you had, that was not a kingdom value whether you were rich or poor. So how do we build our church communities without a bias towards the rich or a bias towards the poor, only having a bias towards building God's kingdom? Thought for the week this week is based on Luke 6:17 to 25, which is the Luke versions of the Beatitudes. And I spent a bit of time thinking about what does it mean to be blessed? What is a blessing? So I risked looking that up on Wikipedia, which can always be a risk. And I'm just going to read what Wikipedia said. It said, in religion, a blessing, also used to refer to the bestowing of such, is the impartation of something with grace, holiness, spiritual redemption, or divine will. So blessing is the impartation of something with grace, holiness, spiritual redemption, or divine will. Of course, I had to go to the Blessing disambiguation page to find out that Blessing is also a very small town in Texas, which has 864 people in it as of 2000, and it's at the end of the railroad, and they wanted to call it Thank God when they got to the end of the railroad, but it was ended up being called Blessing instead. I thought that's really interesting. Is that something about blessing? Well, for them, getting to the end of the railroad was their blessing. But blessing is difficult for us to define. I think we want to think about it in different ways. Jesus is talking about things that are going to be blessed. And he talks about the kingdom of God blessing being to do with things which are not necessarily associated in our society with blessing. He talks about the poor being blessed. He talks about those who struggle and are sad being blessed. He talks about the persecuted being blessed. Now, Matthew describes these Beatitudes just in those terms, but then Luke adds some woes. He says, woe to those who are rich, woe to those who have enough to eat now. So Luke is holding before us these kingdom values which say, actually, to be rich is difficult. To be rich is difficult. It's hard to be in the kingdom of God if you are rich. It's hard to be in the kingdom of God if you have plenty to eat. But you'll be blessed when you struggle. you'll be blessed when you struggle. This passage really takes any sort of prosperity gospel idea out of the counting of something which is biblical. You know, God is not going to bless us with material things to make us rich necessarily. God's blessing is on the poor, on those who struggle, on those who are finding it really difficult. God's blessing is on them. And that is a real challenge for us as individuals and for us as church communities. How do we reflect these kingdom values? How do we take money and wealth and influence out of our idea of success? How are we countercultural and think about the kingdom of God not in those terms at all? What is it that we can do to actually really reflect that Jesus doesn't spend his time talking about sex in the Gospels? He spends his time talking about money and power and influence, and how the ideas of these in the kingdom of God are so different to those built on human understanding. The Dibley moment for the week this week is not a rural moment, but it is an important moment to think about when we've been thinking about transferable skills. So someone I know who was recently ordained was speaking in quite a big urban church, and there were maybe 250 people there. And at the end, a senior church leader from the diocese went up to her and said, "Wow, that was great. You were so confident speaking in front of all those people. That was fantastic." And she went, "Well, thank you very much," and didn't say more. And he went, "What's the largest number of people that you've ever spoken to before?" And she went, "Probably about 2,000." And he was a bit taken aback because he'd forgotten that the transferable skill which she brought to drawing people into God's kingdom was that she was very, very experienced in speaking to large numbers of people in her previous business career. That's it for the Dibley Diaries for this week. I pray that you and your village, however large or small, have a really blessed week where you can all use your skills to draw people into God's kingdom.